What's going on, guys? This is the Illegal Defense Podcast. We're going to get into it. This is episode 4. Got a lot of college football to get into and a lot of NFL to get into. Great games this week and a great slate coming up.
Yeah, and to start things off, I mean, some wild games this week. Texas got upset by Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a team we've been talking about a bunch on here. They pulled an upset. Oregon, big game for the Pac-12, able to hold on against Washington State. But we'll really get into this big Clemson game, the first real test for them. They go and on the road play Wake Forest, the number 21 ranked team at the time, and they were able to pull out a win in overtime against a pretty solid team. Definitely the biggest test for Clemson so far, and for Clemson, they're a team that people have a lot of questions about this year. Still, they kind of had a high rank, really more so due to Dabble's track record and Clemson usually just always finding a way to get things done. Last year was a down year for them, but they're able to pull off the win and avoid an early upset in a ACC conference that is actually looking stronger than maybe some other down years this year.
Yeah, I think DJ kind of established himself a little bit more in that game, too. You could see just I mean, to go to OT in that situation and then pull out a win, it does take some type of guts. It does take some type of it factor. So I think with that, he was able to kind of get things going. Seemed like the offense got things going. There's still some questions on defense, which is kind of odd because the defense is what seemed to be holding up, and the offense was kind of questionable as the year went on. But again, I mean, Wake Forest, they put up a great fight, and I think that was just like you said, it was one of the first tests really for Clemson. Also, it's in a sense it kind of worked out in DJ's favor because there's kind of those questions in the beginning of the season: is he the guy? Is he not the guy? Are they going to pull up Cade Klubnik instead? I feel like this would have been the game to if he did kind of show some struggling, they would have just put Cade in and just try to see what went on. But I think he did well. He obviously had a great game, and they pulled out with the win.
Yeah, and like you said, Clemson is kind of figured to be leaning on their defense this year. That's what they've kind of been doing, and the offense kind of shaky. But against Wake Forest, they were able to find a way to come out with a win. DJ, like you said, answer some questions, able to hold off Cade Klubnik. Seems like there has definitely been some growth there. I don't know if everyone is completely satisfied with him living up to his hype, especially when he was kind of in the conversation with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, and those guys are Heisman contenders, and DJ is, leading Clemson, but not quite at their level, or at least not showing that yet.
Right.
But definitely, like you said, showed some guts, and Clemson gets a chance to have another big game next week as they play NC State. We'll move on to some other games. We saw Michigan be able to squeak out a win against Maryland. They're a team kind of like Clemson, didn't have really great competition. Michigan actually had the worst strength of schedule in all of FBS, but they were able to hold on against Maryland. Baylor able to hold on against Iowa State, but a game that we'll dive into a bit more was a big SEC matchup. Florida, who was ranked number 20th at the time, went to Tennessee in a huge game for Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee hasn't beaten Florida in
In
forever.
years, yeah.
Yeah, the record is so much in favor of Florida, but Tennessee is a team that it's been kind of showing that they could make some moves this year. Their offense kind of came to life last year. They've continued to get the ball rolling, and they find a way to come up with a big win against Florida at home. Stormed the field, and happy days over there in
No.
Knoxville.
I think and Anthony Richardson, he kind of showed a little bit more spark this game. We haven't really seen it all season. There's been, I mean, we've seen it in the beginning of the for the season opener, but aside from that, he kind of struggled in passing. He kind of struggled, even getting passing touchdowns as it is. The
Right.
rushing was never a question because he's an incredible athlete. So I mean, just being an incredible athlete, obviously that comes with the territory of being obviously, what he is. So we just wanted to see. I mean, just in general, I think everybody wanted to see what he could do passing wise. He showed that a little bit in the Florida game, in the Florida Tennessee game. I think Tennessee was just it was just too much for Florida to handle, and we've been talking about Florida as well. So like, it's not like I mean, we've been talking about Tennessee as well. It's not like Tennessee isn't on the rise. Like they've been doing well. They'll have more tests on like with Georgia, with Alabama, they'll have those kinds of tests in the future. But as far as Florida, I think it's a good measure because Florida, I mean, to go into Florida and win that kind of game is also just incredible to do, especially with the way that home crowd is. So,
Well, Florida came to them.
okay,
But
yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but still, I mean,
But
in
yes.
general, to take out Florida
Mhm.
is huge. There's still a powerhouse team regardless. Like you can never really count out Florida. So.
Yeah. They're definitely a program that you know, great tradition over there, and obviously they've kind of haven't been what they used to be, but still, Florida at any given year can beat anybody. And Tennessee, huge win for them. I mean, they're a team that's been in the dark ages for years now. So to be on the rise and be in the top 10 now after that win against Florida, huge for their program and a great step in the right direction for a team that is definitely looking to turn things around and seems like they're kind of putting things together. We knew they were going to be great offensively, but their defense is able to make some plays and help out and they get a good team win here at home. So just some other games. Minnesota able to kind of handle Michigan State. That was a bit surprising to me. Oklahoma falls to Kansas State. Kansas State actually has we talk about the record between Tennessee and Florida. Kansas State actually has a winning record against Oklahoma, which is a bit
Pretty
surprising.
surprising, yeah.
Um,
Considering all the years that they've been like Oklahoma's been dominant for the past few years
mhm.
in that division. So
Yeah, so big win for Kansas State and USC able to hold on against the Oregon State team that's kind of showing some promise this year. Arkansas though goes into Texas A&M, huge game for the SEC. Two teams looking to make some noise this year. Arkansas kind of they showed some struggle in some of these games, but they've also shown that they're not a team to sleep on. Texas A&M, very up and down year. You know, um, Huge problems with their offense. It's kind of been talked about all over the place, and they're able to get a great win at home against an Arkansas team. And yeah, I mean that's big for them. They had that App State loss. They were able to bounce back against a Miami team that
that's
lost this week against Middle Tennessee. Huge upset, and definitely ruined a bunch of people's parlays. As a minus 2,500 favorite
yeah, that's
to
crazy.
lose. But like I said, A&M, they're able to hold off Arkansas. They get the win, and huge win for their program. There's a lot of noise about Jimbo, and even Texas A&M fans themselves maybe not thrilled with the direction the program is heading when you land all these top 5-star recruits, best recruiting class
And
ever.
you're still struggling in a sense.
Yeah, and then you're still struggling. Your offense has left lots to be desired, and yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of like it was really more of for Arkansas, it was really more of just KJ Jefferson or just basically getting things going for their
Mm-hmm.
offense, and it didn't seem like anybody else could get things going. Um, they strive in their run game. KJ ran great, but again, it's if you don't have other people aside from your quarterback, there's only so much your quarterback can do, and there's only so much you want your quarterback to do in those kinds of situations. Because if he does get injured, then it's like you're stuck with your backup. And granted, your backup's most likely going to be able to step in soon in the years. But again, you don't want to risk putting your star quarterback out there. So, I mean, it was like you said, it was a good win by Texas A&M, especially with Jimbo and everything, all the questions around the offense and all the questions around his kind of philosophy with his coaching. So I think that was a pretty good win to get. So
Yeah, and this is a win kind of almost similar to Clemson, grinded out win, took some guts to win like that. I think kind of the question with A&M is, it seems like this is the only way they do win with solid competition. And I think people would kind of want to see A&M kind of really take it to somebody in the coming weeks, and show that they could win more than just close games and games where they could hold people. I mean, that game was a very, very even game through and through.
right.
Similar yards wise, possession wise, and really just came down to the wire in a game that they win by 2 points. Arkansas, they pick up the L here, but they move on and they have a big matchup with Alabama next week. Alabama, who just throttled Vanderbilt to no surprise to anyone else, and they move on there. Utah, easy win against Arizona State, and two teams that we we'll talk about in stock up, stock down, in Ohio State and Kansas get the wins over Wisconsin and Duke, respectively. So yeah, we'll move into stock up, stock down. Ohio State really, they took it to Wisconsin and they kind of left no doubt. This was a game where people talked about it's either going to be a grinded out game or Ohio State's going to really run away with it. And they
Seemed like they did just that.
they did just that. First quarter, 21-0, and the game was over. Right? If Wisconsin keeps that game close, you could and hold on to the fourth quarter. You have a game. They want to play defense. They want to run the ball. They want to chew up the clock. They want to keep C.J. Stroud and the Ohio State offense on the sideline.
Yeah, off the field.
But once Ohio State turns it to a track meet and they start putting up tons of points,
Then it's hard to keep up.
yeah, it's
And I
hard to
think
keep up.
That's something that we're able to take away from the Ohio State offense is they're starting to get explosive. They're starting to show a little bit of promise, and early on against obviously that Notre Dame game, it was kind of like, okay, are there questions around it? Is Notre Dame's defense really that good? And as the season went on, we got to really see, like, obviously Notre Dame really isn't that great. They have a lot of questions. They have a lot of things. So it was kind of just a little bit of offensive continuity for the Buckeyes to really get going. But it seems like they're starting to get going. They're starting to get that flow now. But for some reason, I mean, I feel like Ohio State is never really the team to pick up where they left off at. They kind of like take some time to pick up their offense, to get things going with their defense, whatever the case actually is. But obviously they're showing a lot of promise this year with the blowouts that they've had, and they just look like a well-oiled machine on offense. I think C.J. Stroud is obviously somebody you could talk about in the Heisman race right now. So Ohio State is just showing a lot of promise. So.
Yeah, they're definitely hitting on all cylinders, and that's even without JSN. He just hasn't been able to get right this year.
Yeah.
Seems like they kind of made some mistakes by trying to get him in there maybe a little bit too early, and it seems like maybe now they'll try and let him rest a bit because now, unlike the first game where there was a lot of questions, this is supposed to be the best wide receiver group in the country, and kind of wasn't showing. Now they're kind of hitting full stride, and they look great.
That.
And, their defense too, being able to hold up and stop guys. We just needed to see an improvement over last year, and they've seemed to be doing that. So they're definitely trending in the right direction. As we said, Kansas, another team, 4-0. Their total over-under win total for odds was, over under 4 wins, and they've hit that in the first
Already.
4 wins. And they're a team, Jalen Daniels is really lighting it up with his arm and with his legs. They're putting up points. They're not squeaking out wins, right? It's not a team that they're just finding a way to grind it out, and that takes skill, but sometimes there's some luck involved with those kind of wins. They're just straight up beating opponents, and it's tough because Kansas is a program that's obviously known more for their basketball, but this year, they're able to make some things happen, and who knows? They're a team that if they keep it up, maybe they will be contending for a Big 12 title, and yeah,
Right. And I think the Big 12 is kind of open now.
yeah,
So
wide open.
It's like it gives them an opportunity to show them like, okay, here we've made this progression. Now we can at least compete with these other teams in the Big 12. Let alone compete with them, we can compete for a championship in the Big 12. So it works out for them in the long run, because it's like, okay, say this is more of a progression year, then next year they can bring in a little bit more recruits, bring in better recruits, bring in better quality from maybe in the transfer portal, try to get some things going, and try to build off of that momentum. And when you're able to do that, your program's able to make a lot more moves in bowl games and obviously championships. And again, the Big 12 is kind of open, so it's like there's more than enough room in the Big 12. Even if it's not completely open, there's more than enough room to have another powerhouse in that kind of not
Yeah.
to say Kansas is a powerhouse, but they can develop to be that.
Yeah, and first thing for them would be retaining their coach. Their coach Leipold is now rumored in possible candidates to take over that Nebraska job. Nebraska's certainly going to try to get a big replacement in there to bring their program back to prominence. And you show you could take a team like Kansas and make a turnaround like that. That should certainly put you on people's radars. Another team in the same state, Kansas State, with the big win over Oklahoma. And like we kind of mentioned it a little earlier, they have a winning record against Oklahoma, right? So obviously they're a program that they have Oklahoma's number. They're able to kind of figure them out and find ways to put their best foot forward against a team like Oklahoma that's always in the running to win the Big 12, no matter how open it is. But yeah, Kansas State, they go in and they get the job done. But we'll move on to some teams trending the opposite direction, stock trending down at this point, and that's one of them is Michigan State, right? They come out, they travel to Washington the week prior, and they get stomped out.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of a surprising game.
Yeah, that was a surprise, and they were like a 2.5, 3-point underdog. A lot of people taking them as a lock, and yeah, they just came out flat. Washington, put them kind of to bed early. They tried to make a run late, but it was way too late for them to actually win the game. And then they have a game against Minnesota this past weekend, and they just don't get the job done. They come out flat again. Minnesota takes it to them, and it just doesn't look like it's gonna be their year. I mean, they were able to have a great season last year, and you would think Mel Tucker would have them ready to go, and maybe some slippage was expected after having a Heisman contender and Kenneth Walker
go.
and just doing so well in that transfer portal last year. But this year they're just not a team that can compete the same level. But the another team we have trending downwards is Miami, right? They come out and like we said earlier too, they ruining a bunch of people's parlays, minus 2,500 favorite, kind of a throw-in game to
just to add on to your leg.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more odds. a little bit higher odds to your parlay,
And then next thing you know, that's the main reason why your parlay is
yeah, and then yeah, exactly, and they get smoked by a team like Middle Tennessee, and just disappointing for Miami. I mean, they came into to Texas A&M the week before. Some people thought they were going to win that game. They lost in a close game. Before that, they weren't playing great competition, but they were, putting up 70 points against some of their opponents. And,
right.
You knew that they didn't really have the threats, the wide receiver threats on the outside. But, yeah, I mean, to lose to Middle Tennessee the way they did, I mean, it's very similar. It's somewhat similar to the Marshall win against Notre Dame.
Right.
In that it wasn't close. It's not like you could say Middle Tennessee won with some fluke. I mean, points wise, you could look at the box score and you could tell that. But, Miami just really couldn't get it going, and pretty disappointing for a team that, Mario Cristobal takes over, and you would expect them to get some things right. I mean, it's not the end of the world, right? It's one loss, but man, it's a disappointing loss.
Yeah, I mean, it's one loss, but it's also, you expect, like you said, you expect Mario Cristobal to get these guys going, to start, winning games and try to bring Miami back to what they were. Obviously, you're not going to get them back to the U, but you want to get them to at least make some type of progression. And, we just talked about Kansas. Kansas is on the rise. If Kansas can do it, then I'm certainly... I think Miami should be able to do it. But again, it's kind of disappointing. But maybe they'll get things back on track. Maybe they'll be able to turn it around. Mario Cristobal, maybe he'll get his players to start playing and kind of shape up these losses. You shouldn't be getting losses to these teams like Middle Tennessee. I mean, that's not something that you should really.
Yeah,
that should really be even happening
for a team that people are picking to win their division and possibly go to their conference championship game. And, a lot of people's picks to do that preseason wise. This is the type of game that you have to win when you're going for those kind of things, when you have those kind of goals. So, yeah, Mario Cristobal will certainly have to figure things out and get them right. But, we'll move on to kind of a fun topic being floated in the college football world. LeBron James, mentioning a little jokingly, but, asking if he even has eligibility to come and play at Ohio State. A lot of people talking about, what that would look like, kind of, if in some fantasy world that LeBron James actually came and played tight end, how that would work. You have people chiming in, Brian Hartline saying, I got you. We already talked about this. You're good. Tweets out a picture of them together at that Notre Dame game. The Ohio State AD comes out and he kind of states the rules.
It's all good.
Pretty much says, yeah, you're allowed because you never went to college. You still have your eligibility remaining. He could come and play right now, making it known that it's definitely a possibility. But yeah, I mean, for a player like LeBron, who's in the NBA, one of the most dominant players ever, super athletic freak, maybe one of the best athletes we've ever seen
play the game, really
play the game of basketball, but maybe just regardless of sport, 6'8" guy, 260, super athletic, jumps out the roof fast. Just imagining him lining up at tight end in an offense like Ohio State's,
right?
It's a pretty interesting thing to think about.
I think it's interesting too, only because outside of his athletic ability and things like that, the reason why he's still playing this game at such a high level is because of his intellect. And it's kind of like we have those players like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees before he retired. The reason why they have this longevity is outside of their athleticism. And say, for example, if LeBron started out playing football and he played football at Ohio State, imagine what he could have been as a wide receiver, or if he could have been a tight end, whatever the case may have been. But it's like, I mean, at this point now, I feel like LeBron, I mean, you throw him in at tight end, what can you really do?
Right, and tight end is interesting position because it's one of the positions. One, it's on offense, right? So as a guy who comes from the NBA, I don't think there's many NBA players that can come and switch over to play the game of football seriously. I mean, just there's some physicality in basketball, but nowhere near the level of the NFL. But
Right.
if you were going to make the change, quarterback would be an easy one if you had the skills, right?
Yeah, you
That's
have to have
almost
the skill set for that.
yeah, but that's almost you're almost never gonna find somebody who could step in and be a quarterback. But the tight end position is a position where there's a lot of skill involved. You're on offense. You don't have to be as gritty and as physical. You could kind of hide the tight end. You could put them in packages where you're going to pass.
Right.
And, even if LeBron needed to block, I don't think he's going to come in and be a great blocker from
I
the
don't think he's going to
jump.
be Gronk, but I
Yeah,
think he'll
but
be able to
yeah,
be sustainable.
with his size and his athleticism, you would think that he might be able to step in and be decent enough to be in there on times when he does have to block. So it's not always, oh, LeBron's in, they're passing the ball, just
That
enough to,
to keep the defense honest.
right.
You know what's funny too? They were actually talking. They had a video. It surfaced recently, and it was like, oh, out of everybody, I think it was like on the Team USA thing, and they were like, out of everybody in this gym right now, who you think could play in the NFL? It was actually Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler was like, yeah, I could play for sure. Like, and then Kevin Durant was like, so they asked Kevin Durant, they're like, oh yeah, out of all of these people, who do you think? And so they're like, I don't really know. And there's like, oh yeah, Jimmy said, he's like, man, Jimmy's an idiot. Like, it's like Jimmy Butler. Really, what position is Jimmy Butler gonna play in in the NFL or in football? But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see what LeBron, maybe even wide receiver, because you got to think about it too. Like, a great blocking wide receiver is also really dependable. Look at the Larry Fitzgeralds of the world. Look at obviously, I mean, George Pickens. He's a great blocker. So imagine that would just be great. That would just allow a whole nother facet to your offense. So.
Yeah, and I would probably leave him at tight end. And maybe you flex him out when you want to sometimes, but you gotta love the matchups at tight end because he's not really getting pressed on the outside. 'Cause,
Right.
If you're Ohio State, you're going against top tier corners and stuff like
cornerbacks,
that.
yeah.
You have him at tight end. He's not getting pressed. He's getting matched up with linebackers
Yeah, and
and
he's getting
safeties.
way past
There's just no
cornerbacks.
shot. I mean, this guy hit somebody on a post route on a cover two, and he's gone.
Right.
But yeah, definitely some interesting stuff to think about there. We'll move on to our preview. The some big games coming up for week 5 of college football, and a game that we could talk about first is number 9 Oklahoma State going against number 16 Baylor. Baylor, a team that Coach Dave Aranda has his guys ready. They dropped a game against BYU a few weeks ago, but BYU is a good team, and Baylor's always a team that can recover, and Dave Aranda always getting his guys right. Oklahoma State, another team playing well. So yeah, like I said, number 9 versus 16, big matchup for the Big 12, a wide open Big 12 at that. So yeah, this will be an interesting one. Both teams are can easily win this game. Not a very large spread here. Baylor is only favored by 2.5 points at home, which tells you that on a neutral site, these guys, it'll probably
It's
be like
an
a
even
pick'em
matchup.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, just an interesting matchup. And both teams, come in here, and while all these other things are going on, right? We didn't even touch on kind of this hurricane that might affect a lot of football this week, and
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
definitely going to affect a lot of things.
it might affect a lot of games. But this game is one that I don't think should be affected by that at all. And this is a game that we'll definitely be able to watch, and you can never go wrong when you see 2 top 20 teams go up
Go
against
at
each
it,
other.
yeah.
And for them to be in the same, conference is always fun. So
Yeah.
so a fun matchup for the Big 12. We'll move on to another game. No ranked teams here, but Kansas is a team that it's been making noise. We talked about them earlier. 4-0, already beating their over/under total. They're at home against an Iowa State team. Iowa State just went against Baylor and lost in a close one, but Kansas is a team I've seen people talking about. Oh, the voters. What are they scared of? They need to put Kansas and rank them. What are they,
Yeah.
cowards? That kind of narrative happening. A lot of people talk about how Kansas deserves to be ranked after what they've done so far. So this is another Big 12 game. And this is a fun one. Another one, like we said, shouldn't be affected by this hurricane. One that we'll be able to see, and not ranked, but definitely two good teams, kind of really right outside that top 25. Either one of them gets another win or two that you could easily see them being ranked.
Yeah. I think Kansas is at home too, right?
Yeah,
So
Kansas is at home at
that's
this
a
one.
huge effect. I mean, they're starting to have more people involved in these games. So I think with that, I mean, Iowa State had a great game last week, but
Hmm.
I think Kansas, again, just that momentum of having a winning streak just changes the whole spectrum of things, and then playing at home at that just kind of puts you over the top. So I mean, I personally would have Kansas in it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And Kansas, by the way, plus 3.5 here, so they're not favored at home. So something to think about. If you lay some money on, you get 3.5 points for Kansas there. Another game we'll get into, a top 20 matchup. This is number 2 Alabama going to number 20 Arkansas. So Alabama comes in, they just throttled Vanderbilt. Arkansas coming off that loss in a close game to Texas A&M. I mean, this one is a fun one. I mean, this one I thought Arkansas might have. I thought Arkansas was going to beat A&M last week. I thought it
Right.
was going to set up for a huge matchup with Alabama this week. Arkansas was ranked number 10 before. They fall 10 spots after the loss. But this one, I would have anticipated it being a top 10 matchup. Obviously, that's not it, but still, you can't sleep on Arkansas. The point spread is crazy. I think I was seeing it at plus 17 for Arkansas. I can see Bama running away with this, right? But you could also see this being a close one.
You could also see it being a game kind of like how Texas was to
Exactly.
Alabama.
Exactly.
Texas really tested Alabama. I think that since then they've obviously haven't really had a test.
Hmm.
We talked about it a few weeks ago where Alabama always has these games that they're being tested, especially with the SEC, and they haven't really had that SEC opponent to really test them. I mean, you have Vanderbilt, yes, last week, but it's like, what is really Vanderbilt compared to Alabama?
Hmm.
So again, I think Arkansas, just like you said, they could either keep it close or they could try to, we'll see what happens. But I don't think Arkansas is a team that you can count out, especially with the way that they run the ball. If you have a great run game, that's kind of the counter to keeping Bryce Young and that offense off of the
Right.
field.
And what will be interesting in this one, it's a bit of a rock and meaning a hard place here where, Alabama has the number 2 rushing defense in the country, and Arkansas is one of the top rushing offenses in the country. So something's got to give here, and, we'll see how that turns out, but definitely an exciting game this week. And, with that, we'll move on to some best bets for the college football slate we have coming up. We'll start with a game that we kind of just talked about: Iowa State versus Kansas. We talked about Kansas being plus 3.5. I actually like Kansas to win outright here, so I love taking Kansas 3.5 with the points. I think that's pretty good value and something that seems like a no brainer. I like Kansas to continue with the streak. You know, like we said, they've already beaten that over under for the season on their win total. So I look for them to keep it rolling. We have Arizona State going into USC. This is Arizona State that, as we talked about in previous episodes, lost their head coach in Herm Edwards. They kind of, caught him before he even got off the field there, and pretty much let him know that they weren't going to be retaining him and needing his services anymore. They go and they got throttled, and they're walking into a number 6 USC team that had a tough time in Oregon State.
But I think they're
USC,
looking to bounce back though after
yeah,
that.
I think they're looking to bounce back. I think Arizona State, is kind of a team in shambles right now. They're not sure what's going on. They're recovering from losing their head coach. They're not a very good team. Before that Oregon State team, USC was putting up crazy points, showcasing their talent. I think USC gets back to that in this game before they move on to some tougher opposition in Pac-12 play. But yeah, USC minus 26 here. I like them more with the opening line. You could have found them 23 and a half. I love them at that. 26 is, not what you want to see really if you could get it lower, but I'll take the 26 and 26 points here. They'll probably put up, 50
They'll
plus
probably,
points in this game, and
especially against Arizona State that's kind of struggling to really find their ground.
yeah, and I like them to cover, no problem. Another one, we'll keep it in the Pac-12, and we'll talk about this game that's, California versus Washington State. Washington State favored by 3.5 points. They just played Oregon pretty tough, an Oregon team that, besides that game against Georgia to start out, they've looked pretty good. They've, played some good opponents. They found a way to get their offense and defense kind of working together and pull out some wins. But yeah, Washington State was able to keep that game close against Oregon, had a shot that they could have won that game, and obviously the big upset against Wisconsin before that. But yeah, against a California team that hasn't really played all that well, I like Washington State's chances here, minus 3.5. That's enticing enough to me that I think they win this game by 7 or more. So 3.5 for me. I'll take that. We'll move on to Oklahoma State at Baylor. We covered this game as well, but Baylor minus 2.5 points at home. You got to expect a coach like Dave Aranda to get his team right and get the guys ready to go. A big home game. Both teams ranked highly, big matchup. All eyes are going to be on them. Showcase game for the Big 12. So I like Baylor here. I can't bet against Baylor for big games like this, and I just believe in them to do what they need to do. And then we'll move on to a Big 10 matchup here. Illinois going against Wisconsin. Wisconsin coming off a tough loss to Ohio State where they just couldn't keep up. They didn't have the horses to run with them when Ohio State starts putting up that number of points. And I like Wisconsin to bounce back here, kind of take some of their anger out on Illinois. They're favored by 7 points. With their defense, I think they'll be able to kind of shut Illinois' offense down a bit,
Right.
and kind of run the ball out, hold possession a lot longer than Illinois, and get this win. Minus 7 is good for me. If it was minus 7.5, I wouldn't take it, but I like them by a touchdown. I think they'll cover a touchdown or less. So depending on what you could get this game at, if it stays at 7.5 or drops, I
mean, if it drops, I think you definitely take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, if it's minus 6.5, minus 5.5, then it's beneficial. But looks like it's probably going to stay around minus 7, maybe raise a little bit.
Yeah.
So I mean, so with that, we can kind of get into the NFL picture. We had a great week with the NFL. There was a lot of great games, a lot of close games. Just a lot of telling things. So the first game we could really kind of get into and jump into is this the two undefeated teams in the AFC East. The matchup against the Bills and the Dolphins. They it seemed like a really gritty match. It seemed like no team really, like, going into this, you kind of expect the Bills to really get their offense going, put up a lot of points, put up a lot of just kind of like drive the ball down the field the way they have been all season. But the Dolphins, they put up a fight. The Dolphins played great defense. They played disciplined, and Tua, he seemed to get the job done. And this is something that as Dolphins owners and other if you're a Dolphins fan, you kind of want to see who really is Tua, especially with all these questions, his accuracy and things like that. Is this a fluke? But he kind of proved it. He kind of proved it on the big stage, making big time throws, making a lot of plays for his team. When he was out after that little debacle, it was kind of like the Dolphins kind of looked flat. So it's like obviously he's that spark plug for them. So
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, after that, that weird moment in the game where which we'll talk about later when Tua kind of gets up and stumbles and has to get pulled out of the game. They needed him, and this is a team where one, they're trying to figure out who is Tua, but it also kind of coincides with their team where we've talked about on in previous weeks who are the Dolphins, and we weren't really sure. They had that big comeback against the Ravens. They've this win moves them to 3-0, but 3-0 against some solid competition, right? This is not picking up cheap wins against bad teams.
right,
They played decent teams, Patriots, Ravens, and Bills, and they beat them all. They're
they're all
actually
previous playoff teams.
they're all previous playoff teams, and they've got the job done. And it shows that Tua can do some things. They bring over Tyreek Hill. They've been able to utilize guys like Waddle and things like that, and huge win for them. And right now, at this moment, like I said, 3-0, but they also 2-0 in that division, and they're sitting on top of it. They're up to an early win. So, and we saw the frustration with the Bills, right? They trying to mount that comeback late. Obviously, they lost 21-19, but they were kind of moving into field goal range, and they couldn't get it off. And we see now the viral video of their staff up in the their coordinators flipping
Just
out
going
and
crazy.
and banging everything. But yeah, I mean that's frustrating when you that close and maybe a second or two more of mismanaged time that you might have been able to get that field goal off. But
Nah,
yeah, you just couldn't. And they understand how big that
that
swing
game
is.
is. Yeah.
A win is huge. Now the Bills are 3-0 and they're sitting on the top of the division easy.
Right.
But now the Dolphins have it, and the Dolphins have the win against them. So if it's tied head to head,
then they have that.
yeah, they might have that. Obviously, they'll play again later this year. But yeah, still huge.
I think with the Dolphins too, what is interesting with them is that with Tua, it's kind of like he's showing that he's going through progressions. He's taking his time, where he's not hurrying. He's being quick, but he's not hurrying. Which is great, which is a great sign. As far as with the Bills, there's kind of some questions. I don't want to say with Josh Allen, but me personally, if I'm a head coach, if I'm McDermott, I don't want Josh Allen trying to truck linebackers to get into the end zone, because previous to even the drive of him going down the field, he lowered his shoulder, tried to truck a defender, and it looked like he got a stinger. I don't know, I could be wrong, but from the looks of it, looked like he got a stinger. Next play, couldn't make a simple out route that he's showed us time and time again that he could throw. Wasn't on time. He wasn't able to throw it, and it's kind of like that's kind of what happens when you're kind of that physical quarterback, when you don't value, all right, if it's not there, let me throw it away, live for another down. But again, I mean, he's obviously a great runner, but that's something that I think they should limit a little bit.
Yeah, it's something that you do want to take advantage of his skills, but you want to limit that. You don't want him doing too much of that. Sometimes when it's necessary, okay, but you want to keep that down to a minimum, because at the end of the day, he is your quarterback. You don't want to get hurt. I mean, we've seen things, and obviously, Josh Allen, he's built to a little bit better than these quarterbacks. But we've seen guys like Derek Carr try to fight for that extra yard in the first a first down in previous years and get smoked, and
then
now you lose your quarterback,
injury.
right? And you can't have that. So
Right.
hopefully the Bills can figure that out.
And speaking of injured quarterbacks, we have the Patriots-Ravens game. The Ravens took care of business against the Patriots, 37-26. But obviously, we have Mac Jones. He's out with an injury, I believe an ankle sprain. He's going to be out for a couple of games, which is kind of unfortunate because there was a lot of questions with their offense, but it seemed like they got going. We have the Bengals and the Jets. Another AFC East loss, unfortunately. But I mean, the Jets are the Jets. The Bengals took care of business. Joe Burrow did what he had to do, and we have the Packers Bucks, which was a pretty good game. It was also another defensive kind of slugfest. Again, no offense really could get going. We obviously seen the struggles with Tom Brady not having his main receivers. Again, these even with Aaron Rodgers, these old quarterbacks, not that it's bad that they're old, but they want to trust their receivers. And you can tell early on in the season that's where you really build these relationships, this chemistry between these receivers. Um Bucks not having Mike Evans was significant,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, huge loss not having Mike Evans. They're already dealing with too many injuries really at the receiver position to have Mike Evans suspended for a huge game, matchup of two solid teams that everyone expects both of these guys to make the playoffs regardless of the outcome of this game, but to
right.
not have Mike Evans there is a huge loss. They've kind of already been struggling really on the offensive end
Yeah.
and really trying to find their way there. The Bucks have actually been great on defense this year.
Yeah, that's their strong point. And then it's kind of also like you may meet this team in the NFC Championship
Right.
or in a divisional. Um, if if the Bucks continue to play well and the Packers continue to play well, who knows? Maybe they're fighting for that number one seed, and that head to head is what decides it. So
Right, for
it's
sure.
it's it's unfortunate, but that's just the reality. Unfortunately, I think Tom Brady obviously he's had some problems with other receivers. Russell Gage was dropping wide open passes. Um, I mean, you can't really expect too much from Cole Beasley, but he was at least somewhat reliable.
Hmm.
But I think they'll shape out things. I think they'll be able to get back on track. I mean, it is the Bucks. It's Tom Brady. They're gonna find a way.
Yeah,
So
and they did keep it close, and there was that whole fiasco as well with Aaron Rodgers saying, the scoreboard kind of revealed some
yeah,
information that helped them win, which we haven't really found out what
what
exactly that
exactly it
was
was?
yet,
Yeah.
but that's an interesting thing that all sorts of conspiracy theories and people trying to figure out what that's about.
Yeah, try to figure out what's going on with that. So with that, we have another divisional rival from the Bucks. We have the Panthers and Saints game. Panthers won that 22-14. Kind of didn't expect that. Chris Olave had a great game, big game, another 100-yard receiving game. He seems to be kind of like the front runner of the offensive rookie of the year so far.
Hmm.
Although it's only week 4, I believe. He's showing a lot of promise on that offense. There are some questions with Jameis Winston, but I think I think overall the Saints they're going to be all right. Then we have the Jags seem to shock everybody. I mean, we knew the Jags didn't have a healthy. I mean, the Chargers didn't have a healthy Justin Herbert, but the Jags packed them up 38-10,
Hmm.
and Trevor Lawrence is starting to get going. And I think that's something that we talked early on about Doug Peterson and how he would shape things and how he would be possibly a coach of the year. So that's good. Then the big Monday night game with the Cowboys and Giants. What's your thought on that? With the Giants at least.
Yeah, I mean, both teams come into this, uh, you know, surprising in their own ways, right? The Cowboys obviously they lost the opener to the Bucks, and Dak gets injured. Everyone kind of thinks this team is, you know, not doesn't expect much from them. Their backup Cooper Rush comes in. They get a win against the Bengals team, which was surprising, where they just kind of got off to an early start. Joe Burrow couldn't get going against that defense, and they roll into MetLife against the Giants, and Giants 2-0 coming into this game, making some noise, people believing in them. They're going against a backup quarterback, and they just don't get the job done. This game was one that really could have went either
Either
way.
way.
It wasn't decided until late. There's a bunch of plays on both sides that could have swung this game all over. From the beginning, middle, and end of this game.
Right.
So yeah, I thought the Giants were going to be able to capitalize on the backup quarterback being at home, being hot, and getting a win here. they just couldn't get it done. Their offense was kind of up and down, guys dropping passes. The Cowboys, credit to their defense, they were able to come in and sack Daniel Jones a bunch of times and
Yeah.
really put pressure on him. I mean, really Daniel Jones looked best when he was just able to escape up the pocket and make a throw, and he was able to get some of those things to go good. Saquon obviously had a great run for a touchdown, 30-plus yarder, but the Cowboys proved to be a little too much. They were able to.
Their line was just incredible. I
Yeah.
mean, Dexter Lawrence, he was getting constant pressure. Micah Parsons was getting constant pressure. I think, although the Giants were 2-0 and we were facing a backup quarterback, I think Giants fans have a lot to be positive about.
Yeah, I think really both of these teams, right?
Yeah.
2-1 after this. Similar situations. I mean, obviously the Giants have a loss against a divisional opponent now.
Right.
But, both teams have things to be happy about, right? The Cowboys pick up another win. They get to, kind of salvage, some semblance of being able to get to the playoffs or having a winning season and keeping a shot at winning this division without Dak. And the Giants, they're 2-0, but they were 2-0 and they take the loss here. But being 2-1, I think if you could have asked any Giants fan if that was going to happen, they would have took it before this. They'll take that every day after the past few seasons they have.
Yeah, and then on top of that, it's like Dable's starting to make a shift in this culture. You can see that the Giants want to play for him. You can see that the Giants are fired up. They're playing till the snap or till the whistle blows. And then Daniel Jones, he did have the pick that kind of ended things, but the receiver slipped. There's a lot of drops. Daniel Jones was making throws on time. Again, it's just really unfortunate, especially with the receiving core. Sterling Shepard goes down with a non-contact injury. I think they just have to do something about that turf in MetLife. It's like they bring in billions of dollars and you can't even get grass to play on, and that turf is. I mean, the Niners game a few years ago, so many players got injured that game, and continuously just players after players torn ACLs.
I mean, I'll tell you this: the Giants, just in general, I mean, they built that stadium not too long ago. It's still a relatively new stadium, right? And I don't know what they were doing. Like they put that stadium by the mall over there in Jersey. I mean, I've heard not great things about going to those games where you have to, pack 50,000 people through this tunnel to get to the parking lot. If you get there late, there's no shuttles and people have to walk and it's a mess to get out of there. And so they didn't set it up right. The stadium, you see other teams that have new stadiums, SoFi and other places like that, state-of-the-art stuff, the Raiders Stadium. The Giants kind of just slapped together a stadium. I mean, it's decent. It's not bad. Right. But for a New York team that both New York teams use, a stadium that both New York teams use, you would think, they would put some more effort in there. You could get more out of it, right? And being in a location like that is not the greatest location, but it's just outside of New York City. You get people from Jersey and everywhere else could come in. People from New York City could go out to there. They just have to do something. They got to figure some things out. There's no excuse for stuff like that. There's no excuse for having turf that's people are tearing ACLs nonstop,
and it's every season it's something, and it's a season-ending injury, and it sucks to see Sterling Shepard go down, being that he was kind of like the only reliable receiver aside from Richie James
and the longest tenured Giant too. So. Yeah.
So I mean that may have been his last game.
Yeah, they're talking about that might have been his last game as a Giant. So yeah.
But, I mean, in general, hopefully he'll still play. I think he's more than capable of still playing, and maybe he'll be able to be on a championship team and try to get that ring. So moving on, we have another divisional game with the Rams and Cardinals. It was kind of a big game for Aaron Donald. He got his 100th sack, which is obviously a huge milestone.
Yeah.
So the Rams took care of business 20-12 against the Cardinals. The Cardinals kind of looked, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like Kyler could get going without DeAndre Hopkins, and I'm sure they're looking forward to having him. So moving up, we have the stock up, stock down. So with that, for the stock up teams, we have the Eagles. They seem to be playing very well. I didn't personally buy into it at first, only because I don't personally believe too much in Jalen Hurts. But at this point, it's like you have to really
Yeah,
respect what he's doing.
at this point, he's kind of proving the doubters wrong.
No,
Maybe at some point he'll regress or something. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't buying in week one. You know, they come in against the Lions. I kind of expected that to be a close game. I thought the Lions would have had a chance to win it. They kind of did too. It ended up being a close game. The Eagles pull it out. I was kind of non-committal on the Eagles. Then they come out, smoke the Vikings, and then they pick up another win here, and
against the Commanders.
yeah, against the Commanders. So Jalen Hurts has been looking amazing. True dual threat, right? He's moving around with his legs and picking up yards, picking up touchdowns, but also slinging the ball all over the place, which
Right.
was the big question, right? Everyone knew with his legs he was a decent runner. He's one of the he's a better built guy, bigger, stronger guy. He can take some hits, almost maybe like a running back type way that can throw the ball, but always concerns about his accuracy. And it seems like he's kind of putting it together right now, which is scary for
For a lot of
opponents.
yeah, for a lot of
And
teams.
outside at the skill positions and receivers, they're making plays, right? Devontae Smith has a big game. AJ Brown has already shown
Promise in his first game.
right. So yeah, definitely the Eagles are a team that's looking pretty good. And when you look around that NFC East, a division that hasn't been very good lately, they look like they're
The most
definitely a cut
consistent
above the
team.
rest. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's good to see that Jalen Hurts is picking up his quarterback play. Again, we can't expect Jalen Hurts to kind of be like Aaron Rodgers, but we can
Mhm.
expect him to somewhat make some progression in his passing. And with that, we have another great passer who's made some great strides this week and just in general. Trevor Lawrence and the
Right.
Jags. The Jags seem to be on the rise, and they seem to show a little bit more promise. We've seen them even in week one when they were versing the Commanders. They competed. They almost won that game, almost pulled out a win with that game, but at the end they couldn't. And each week it seems like they're building on that. And again, we talked about the whole situation with Doug Peterson, and obviously when you have more stability in the coaching, that translates into how the whole team works. So they took care of the Chargers last week, and that was a big surprise. Regardless of Justin Herbert's injury status, to take care of that defense, to go against that defense, Trevor Lawrence is showing that he's able to show that he can progress as a quarterback, that he's not kind of this bust or anything like that. And again, I think the Jags are showing a lot of promise. So
Yeah, yeah, and they're definitely a team that they look primed to pick up more wins than last year already. It's I kind of expected that with them going into the season. Their number one overall pick Trayvon Walker, who people had questions about when he was picked number one, but he's been playing well as of lately, showing his uber athleticism, being able to not just get after the quarterback, but also athletic enough to jump around and grab picks, pull them out the air. And yeah, Trevor Lawrence obviously more comfortable in year two in an offense, no drama around Tim Tebow or Urban Meyer or all these other things. And
then all these distractions.
yeah, and Trevor Lawrence just able to play football, and we knew the guy was talented.
Yeah.
Everyone was talking about Trevor Lawrence since he was a freshman and at Clemson. I mean, really before that, for people who follow recruiting. But yeah, I mean, he comes in as a true freshman, does spectacular things. Solid
And I was
career at Clemson, and
right.
finally into the NFL. Now he's putting it all together, and definitely a good start to a second year for him.
Yeah, and even last year we saw a couple of throws. I mean, there was a few games where he was making throws that not every quarterback in the NFL could make. So that was great. And so we have some teams that they're showing some concern, some stock down teams. We have the Saints. Doesn't seem like the Saints are consistent in any type of offense, whether it's running or passing. Um, don't know what's going on with Jameis. Seems like Jameis should be a little bit better with having Jarvis, having Chris Olave. I mean, Chris Olave is playing great,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also like you have to be able to get these things going, and I don't know. I don't know what's going on in New Orleans,
Yeah,
but
it's a bit odd, right? I mean, Jameis, I expected better from Jameis. I mean, he's a guy who before he was kind of let go by the Bucks. I mean, one thing you could never say is that he couldn't sling it. You know, his problem
yeah,
was the turnovers. He'll throw for tons of yards, he'll throw for tons of touchdowns,
but he
but he
just
was
turns the
he was
ball
turning the
over.
ball over. Now it seems like he's just not letting the ball go that same kind of way. And like you said, it's surprising when he has a receiving core like Michael Thomas, Olave, who's been killing it as a rookie.
Right. You have
Jarvis
Alvin
Landry.
Kamara.
Yeah, Kamara. I've heard people talking about, oh, is this the time to trade Alvin Kamara? I mean, these are the kind of
Yeah.
questions that people are bringing up at this point. Not that I don't think anything is that serious, especially this early in the year. But I think most people were expecting more from them. People have picked the Saints to, win this division. If
Right.
they don't win this division, to make the playoffs, and they're kind of struggling a little bit more than people would have thought. So
Yeah.
yeah, still some time to turn it around, but yeah, the Saints need to figure out some things and answer some questions going forward.
I think ever since Sean Payton stepped down too, it's kind of like maybe before Jameis got injured last year, he was having a great year. He was, he cut down on the turnovers a lot, was able to capitalize on making the right decisions in that offense, and he was striving. Then obviously Sean Payton steps down, and there's a new coach, new things, new concepts. I'm sure that Jameis is learning, and that could be part of it. But again, it's just kind of unacceptable. You have all that talent on that offense. So another team that we will get into really is the Broncos. Russ seems to be struggling a little bit. Seems a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know. I really don't know what it is. It seems like they really can't get things going. I you know I don't know how Melvin Gordon really fits in that situation. I mean, granted he was able to get a touchdown against
Hmm.
the Niners, but it's there's just no consistency at all on that offense.
Yeah, this is another one pretty weird. I mean, the Broncos are a team that a lot of people are high on. I mean, they've been talked about for years as, oh, they just need a quarterback. They just need a quarterback. Solid defense. They have pieces there already. They
Right.
bring in Russ. They get their guy. A lot of hype. Supposedly this is the best division in football. All this hype about all these teams. The Broncos have just been a flat out disappointment. Running game, between Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams, it seems like they're just either sometimes they don't utilize them the way you would think, and then other times, like we had on the Seattle game, they were playing well, and then they're fumbling in the end zone, right?
Yeah.
And then you're seeing memes all over the internet of, oh, this is what happened when you
When
let
you
Russ
let Russ
cook, and
cook.
it's like all these funny things of
Well,
burning stuff down. It's weird, and they have the weapons. Like
yeah,
like I
they do
said,
have the
they have the
weapons.
weapons for Russ. He's just it looks like, I don't know. He just lost it.
It just doesn't. You know what it looks like too. It kind of looks like he's just not comfortable. He's not confident. And a confident Russ is, let me go make the play. Boom. He seems hesitant. He seems like and then there are times where there are flashes. And he talked about it. He was
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I could really see this game. I could really see this offense being explosive. And of course, as an average viewer, you're like, well, how could you guys could barely drive down the field and make any type of third down conversions. How could that be? But in a sense, I can see what he means. When they do get continuity, when they were able to kind of get things going, it seems good. But and again, they weren't really able to take shots down the field, and that's kind of Russ's thing. Like Russ
Right.
is somebody that he has a great deep ball, one of the greatest deep balls in the NFL right now. Um, so I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett is really capitalizing on Russ's strengths, really.
Yeah, we've already seen him kind of mismanage some
Yeah,
late game
so
situations. They had to bring somebody in to kind of be more in charge of that so he could focus on play calling. And I know we talked about it too. We were like, well, you bring in a guy to focus on game management because you can't do it, so you could focus on play calling,
But
but
the play
your play
calling
calling
isn't
hasn't
even
been good either, right?
nah.
So he's mismanaged some play calling stuff. He's mismanaged some game management stuff. Russ hasn't looked the same. They
Right.
kind of really just need to put it all together. They've had some bright spots on defense, and
Yeah, I mean their defense looks great.
yeah,
I
but
don't think there's many questions with their defense.
right, but they need to get the rest going, right? Game management, time management, play calling, performance stuff from some wide receivers and running backs stepping up. Russ getting on the same
Russ getting
page
on
with
the same
everybody.
page with
I mean, look,
receivers.
they were getting penalties for delay of
Delayed
games
games at
and
home.
yeah, it wasn't. I mean, you have Eli Manning making jokes that the kickers, the punters, worth
Should've got
more
more.
than Russell Wilson. And this is a guy who we've seen Russell Wilson actually on the Manning cast. We know he's very friendly with them. He's very good friends with Peyton Manning, who lives in Denver and is kind of always around the practice facilities and in the building over there. So yeah, Russ has to step it up, and
He has to step it up, and I think he will. I think it takes time. I mean, Peyton Manning's tenure when he first got there, they were 1-2, and Russ, they're not in a bad situation. They're sitting at 2-1. They're tied with the top of the division. So again, it's something that's odd what's going on, but I think they'll figure it out. A team that does have to figure it out is in their division, which is the Raiders. Don't know what's going on with them. You had a great defensive player in Chandler Jones. You add Devontae Adams and Derek Carr can't get it done. Doesn't seem like Josh McDaniels is a real head coach. We saw his struggles in Denver. We saw his struggles being outside of the whole Bill Belichick tree. They had what's kind of crazy is that they already had a long sit down with him apparently.
yeah.
So I mean, we'll see what happens with him, but
Yeah, and this one, just a disappointment, right? Like you said, you bring in some of these players, stud players, a team that people had high hopes for. We know it's a strong division, but now they're sitting at 0-3, and we know the stats, right? 0-2, you could turn around your season. 0-3, you're almost guaranteed not to make the playoffs at this point, and it sucks to kind of think of them in that light as not worth thinking about for the rest of the season because they're not going to be able to do anything else. But
yeah.
I mean, that's just what the numbers say, and obviously you kind of feel bad for a guy like Devontae Adams leaves the Packers to go to the Raiders and play with a friend of his who was his college quarterback. But at this point, none much to say. Just a disappointment. Hopefully they could at least use some things to kind of get back on track and kind of try again next year.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with them. I think we have to see some type of progression from Derek Carr too. He's been playing average at best, even worse than what anybody anticipated. So we're gonna get into some topics. We have some things that we talked about the whole Dolphins situation with Tua, and it was kind of weird when he got up. It looked like it was. I mean, his head just completely hit the turf.
Yeah, it was a weird situation because he got kind of just shoved a little bit at the end, and the defensive player got the penalty for it. You watch it again, it doesn't look like he did anything bad, but it was late, so you can understand the penalty. But he really just bounced his head right off the turf, and you see guys get hit hard, and you see guys get rolled up on their ankles and all these things, and it's like, oh, that looks bad. But man, it's a little scarier when you see a guy
like with a head injury.
Yeah, where he gets up and just starts stumbling around, and you see teammates have to come and try to hold him up, and it's like, man, this guy is this guy gonna be all right? And then they take him to the locker room, and then now obviously the whole
was it a concussion?
Yeah, was it a concussion? Did the team follow protocols correctly? What's going on with that? How is he able to get back in the game so quickly and all this stuff? And Yeah, it's tough to watch really any player go through that kind of situation.
Yeah,
But then yeah, there are questions about that because that's something that everyone watching the game is, you see
concerned
that,
about.
right? And you're concerned like, oh man, is this guy gonna be okay? What happened here? Then you see him back in the game. Not to mention he comes back in the game and they win the game, right? But they have protocols for a reason. They have things that they need to follow, and
Yeah,
um,
it's very concerning considering that this is not a contact sport; it's a collision sport.
mhm.
There's tons of injuries where players have been paralyzed, players have been they're a lot of head trauma, a lot of things like that. So, and when he got up, when you have a back injury, and what's kind of odd is, I mean, granted, there's a first time for everything, but Tua doesn't have a history with his back. He has a history with his hips, with other injuries, but not anything with his back. And for that to kind of happen, and usually you'll feel it most likely like flare up a little bit, maybe before the game, maybe during the week. There wasn't any reports of it. For him to get up and then just go down like that, and it's kind of like a woozy kind of look. It's like
Mhm.
it's not a good look. It just looked like he just got the lights knocked out of him, and then they're like, "All right, let's sit him out for a quarter. Let Teddy Bridgewater go to work, and then we'll see how he feels." Maybe he's covering up for them with the whole back situation, but
Mm.
again, I mean, I personally wouldn't cover for them. But
Yeah, I think he is covering for them, saying it was his back. I mean, when you see him get up like that, that doesn't look like a back injury to me.
yeah,
And
not at all.
to be honest, it doesn't look like a back injury to anybody. That's why it's being looked into, right? And it clearly looks like it's a head injury. Like
No,
you said, we've seen guys get injured badly. We've seen people like Ryan Shazier go out of the game. Granted, that's a different situation where
right.
he could barely walk after that and has to rehab. But we've seen even guys who finished their careers in Junior Seau, right? An all-time great football player, and the thought is that the trauma to his head caused him to, kind of lose it a little bit, and he ends up taking his own life after a bunch of problems. So,
Right.
it's something worth looking into. But yeah, it seems pretty clear to me he's covering for the Dolphins. Maybe not so much because he wants to cover for them. I don't know really how his relationship is with the Dolphins. I mean, especially after all the trade rumors and all that type of stuff. But
Right.
just you almost have to just for your team at that point, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are you gonna say? Oh
Especially a
no,
game like that
yeah,
where
he
you're in
probably
it, really.
yeah he probably wanted to get back in the game. He was probably on board with it, and so now when they go to get in trouble, he tries to
Cover up for them
cover
a
up
little
for,
bit.
for them and for himself, right? Even though at the end of the day, they kind of expect players to want to play, and it's the organization's job to hold them back. So it's not like he could really get in trouble for wanting to get back in there. But
Right.
yeah, it's just a tough situation, and it remains to be seen how that will unfold. But yeah, definitely a concerning thing for Tua, and something to keep an eye on for really everybody around the league to see how they start handling these kind of situations.
Yeah. So we're gonna get into it with the following week of the NFL. We have another pretty exciting week. We have a few key games to kind of hone in on with the Chiefs and the Bucks. The Chiefs are traveling to traveling to Tampa again. I don't even know if that's gonna happen with all these hurricanes that's happening, or with the hurricane that's happening, and it's kind of looking like they're probably. I don't know if they'll even play.
Yeah,
And
I heard that they're evacuating people from there. I know that the Bucks, I saw that they did evacuate already.
yeah,
So if they're going to come back, I guess that depends on how the storm unfolds and all that stuff. But
right.
definitely going to be a crazy week for the Bucks. I mean, it's, especially for a Bucks team that needs to rebound from a loss to Green Bay. They're back to back with a game with the Chiefs coming to them, right?
Yeah.
They almost would have been better off playing on the road at this point because now they're displaced. And if they do play this game, they probably have to
Then
come back now, and you're wasting extra time going in and out, and the conditions are not going to be great.
right.
So, yeah, just a tough situation for the Bucks, but
We'll see what happens. And
right.
luckily they get back Mike
Mike
Evans.
Evans,
He just
yeah.
got off of his
Suspension.
suspension. The Chiefs, they kind of looked flat against the Colts. Couldn't really get anything going. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, a bunch of special
So
team blunders and some missed kicks
yeah,
and really weird game for
and
the
Tom Brady,
Chiefs.
he seems to play. He seems to play well against the Chiefs. Well, we'll see what happens with Pat Mahomes. I mean, he's not going to be going over. He's not going to be going against no easy going defense too.
Right,
So
right.
the
Yeah.
Bucks have a substantial.
Yeah, the Bucks right now, fourth in total yards and stuff like that.
Uh,
First in points allowed.
yeah,
So it's a solid defense. So, but like we said, Mahomes, he could put up points, as we all know, right? So, and then especially dealing with this hurricane situation, we'll see how that unfolds. If they even get to play this week, if they do, I've been like I was saying earlier, something to keep an eye on for the Bucks. They got to leave. I don't even know where they went to right now, but they'll have to come back. But at the same time, right? You got to look at it. If they come back and they do play, the conditions are decent enough to play the game, but
right.
it's high winds. It's also a situation where maybe the Bucks. It's better for the Bucks. They have a good defense.
Yeah, and they're able
Mahomes
to
can't
take
pull his
care of.
magic. I don't know how they're going to handle having to just run the ball all game. Where
They don't really
I feel
have
like
a back for that.
right, and I feel like the Bucks are in better position with Fournette, have the better defense. We saw how this turned out in a game, to start the year with the Bears and the 49ers, where the Bears were able to pull out the win in that monsoon over there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely some interesting things unfolding for that game.
So another great AFC matchup that we have is the Bills and the Ravens. Again, the Ravens, they're at home, but they're actually the underdog against the Bills. The Bills -3 are the favorite, but this is going to be a great game. I think this is a potential game of the week. You have two high power offenses with the Ravens, with the Bills. We could kind of see more of where Lamar stands, although he's been having an outstanding season. And obviously the Josh Allen, he's having a great season. He's being able to put up these numbers, and maybe he'll want to rebound back from losing to the Dolphins. Again, that's not an easy loss to just brush over. And then the Ravens, they have something to prove. I mean, the Ravens had the Dolphins, they had the Patriots to verse, and then they had the Jets. So kind of middle of the pack competition. The Ravens really haven't had a test yet, a real test. I mean, you can say the Dolphins, they kind of imploded, but again, if they want to win this game, I think their secondary definitely needs to step up. I think they can't let Stephon Diggs go off. They can't let Gabe Davis go off. Those are definitely key players that they have to hone in on. And again, I think Josh Allen, I think he'll there's only so much you could do to contain him, but we'll see what he does in this game.
Yeah, and like you said, two top offenses. The Bills second in total yards, the Ravens seventh. Really, probably why the Bills are favored is their defense, right? The defense is second in total yards allowed, compared to the Ravens. Their defense isn't really holding up so far, and that's really probably mostly due to that game against the Dolphins. Really kills their
Letting that
averages.
comeback, yeah.
Yeah, but the Bills complete team all around, and they lost to the Dolphins too, right? Both these teams lose to the Dolphins, and looking to get back in it against each other. Two teams that are looking for playoff spots and have playoff aspirations. Could see them play in the postseason, so definitely a big game for both of them. Both of them are not happy to drop that game against the Dolphins, and should be a great game. I mean, it doesn't get better than having Josh Allen, a guy kind of becoming face of the league worthy in that Patrick Mahomes mold, and going against Lamar Jackson, who's kind of already there, and playing for a huge
Contract.
deal this season. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely an interesting game, and like you said, potential to be kind of game of the week here.
Yeah, and also just Lamar is betting on himself, so we'll see what happens. I think this is going to be a great game to watch, and a great game. One of those kind of like offensive, kind of exploding kind of games where it can be kind of like a game of the year.
Yeah.
So
And it's on, the showcase game on Sunday night, right? Another
right.
another thing. So
Yeah,
yeah.
so we'll see. We'll see what happens with that game. I think that game is definitely interesting. We have another divisional game with the Rams and the 49ers. Those games always seem to be close, even though sometimes the matchups could be like completely off. Like, I mean, we've had years where the 49ers had not much talent and the Rams had significant amount of talent, and there's still been really close games.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Jimmy G, obviously, he probably wants to bounce back from his performance with the Broncos. They didn't really run the ball much. They kind of put the ball in Jimmy G's hands. I think in order for him to get a little bit more comfortable in that offense, you have to get the run going. You have to get Debo Samuels going. You have to. I think we'll see what happens with the Rams against them. I don't know. I really can't call this game, to be honest. These games are usually games I kind of avoid as far as like betting on because
Mm-hmm.
it could really go either way. But
Yeah, yeah, and this is a tough one. You have the 49ers favored by 2.5 points. They're at home. This is the Monday night game. But yeah, both of these teams kind of similar in total yards on offense this year so far. And, like you said, every game, a lot of games against each other, you don't know what to expect, right? There could be big differences in their record and they'll play each other close. And the worst team will beat the better team, and then the better team will blow out the worst team. And these could happen in the same season. So like a lot of divisions, these divisional games are kind of toss ups.
right,
Hard to really get a read on who's the favorite here. I mean, the 49ers, they dropped that game to the Bears, and a weird game to start the year, but they've looked decent otherwise. I mean, you kind of get the feeling they should have won that game last week against the Broncos, right?
yeah,
Kind of hard loss for them. The Rams, they haven't really lived up to expectations. They
they're still
lose to
trying to
the
find
yeah,
themselves.
they lose to the Bills to open up in a game that they kept it close when the Bills were having turnovers and then got blown out once they cleaned that up. They had a close game against the Falcons, which is a team that nobody is really checking for or has that high hopes for. And you just hope for the Rams to kind of pick it up and have Stafford kind of get back to form like he was last year and get
Yeah.
that offense rolling.
And the Rams struggled with them last
Mm-hmm.
year. The Rams
Mm-hmm.
were 1-2 against them. I mean, they beat them in the playoffs, which was they were fortunate enough to have that great play and that great turnover by Jimmy G. But outside of that, the Rams, I mean, the Niners had their number all season. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see what happens with that. Next, we'll get into some of the best bets that we have for the week. There's a lot of games that are kind of iffy, but we do have a lot of games that we could be pretty certain on. We could start off first with the Giants Bears, where the Giants, I believe, are the favorite by -3.
Yeah.
That line was kind of moving back and forth, and I think it'll move definitely back and forth until like game day. I think the Giants. I think they take that. I think that I would take the Giants spread -3. They did again. They did showed some promise in that Cowboys game. Saquon was running the ball well. Daniel Jones was running the ball well. I think we just have to see some progression with their receiving core. I
Right.
think their receiving core, Kenny Galladay, pick it up a little bit. Richie James try to pick it up a little bit. Just make these catches, and maybe they'll have a chance with that.
Yeah, and I like the Giants here -3. I mean, like we said, they got off to a good 2-0 start. They lose a tough game against the Cowboys at home. They haven't looked great offensively, but they got some grind out wins. I think against a Bears team that doesn't have much to show thus far, they don't seem to, the Giants sometimes they look out of sync with their receivers. They're rotating in a bunch of guys. They're having trouble. They had some drops here and there.
Right.
So, at least they can kind of put things together and they show flashes. The Bears haven't really shown that to me. I'd like the Giants at home -3 here. And I think, they're more of a complete team and they have a higher ceiling on on their offense to be able to put up more points.
Yeah, and I think Dable's going to make a lot of corrections and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of adjustments. I think Dable's done a substantial job, especially just starting off.
Mm-hmm.
So next we'll get into the Lions versus the Seahawks. The Lions are -6.5 favorite at home. I'm gonna ride with the Lions. I think they were neck and neck with the Vikings just last
Uh-huh.
week, and they almost won that game. Had they hadn't blown coverage, I think they would have pulled out with that. So, and the Seahawks, obviously, there's a lot of questions with them. I wouldn't really. I don't know. They play well, really well at home, but away it seems like that's where they struggle, obviously.
Right,
So
and the Seahawks, they still have Geno as their quarterback. They played well against the Broncos at home. That was a weird game. One, they were at home. Their infamous crowd is there helping them
right,
out. It was a very emotional game with Russ coming back. They're able to take advantage and pull things off defensively against a Broncos team that hasn't played well offensively, like we talked about too. But the Lions close game against the Eagles, who we talked a lot about on Stock Up, how the Eagles have been kind of figuring things out on offense, and Jalen Hurts doing a little bit of everything, and they kept pace with them. They kind of were blowing out the Commanders and kind of let their foot off the gas towards the end and let the Commanders score some points, but they scored enough points to get on the way there that there was never really any doubt that they were going to lose that game. And then, last week they were neck and neck with the Vikings, right? And this is a Lions team that's clearly improved. They were going last season and people were wondering if they were going to get a win at all. And, what a difference an offseason makes. And, their offense has been great. Amon-Ra, St. Brown has been putting
yeah,
up
he's been
numbers.
phenomenal.
Their running backs have, all been contributing. So,
Yeah,
I'm high on the Lions here. I like them to go against a Seahawks team that, if Geno Smith isn't fully getting everything rolling and their defense isn't clamping down extremely well, they're very susceptible to, you know, once they're down, I don't see the Seahawks being able to put up tons of points to catch back up in a game. So all the Lions need to do is get a little bit of a lead here, and I think they're off
I
to the
think
races.
yeah.
I like the Lions -6.5. I think they'll I like their chances to win by a touchdown. I can see this being a more than a 7-point spread once it's all said and done.
Right. Then we have the Commanders +3 versus the Cowboys. And then the Cowboys are at home. Um, Again, I think I don't know what's going on with the Commanders. They seem to just play too late. They just seem to play a lot of catch up ball. They can't get things going on early. I don't know if it's Carson Wentz is. I don't think he's the guy. Um, but the Cowboys, there were some reports that Dak might play next game, and I don't know if it's because he's kind of feeling like, all right, I don't know who this Cooper Rush guy is, but he might take my job, and that's not something I'm okay with.
Yeah.
So maybe let's take these stitches out of my thumb and let's get going. That might cause for some discomfort. Obviously some margin of error. I mean, he's had margin of error just playing regularly. So I mean, I think that would cause some problems. So but I think the Cowboys get it done. I think they're finding a way. That defensive line is playing great. So I think I would just me personally, I would take the Cowboys money line for that game.
Yeah, I actually like the Commanders here. I like this to be a little bit of a correction type of a game. The Commanders have been putting up points. I mean, last game they didn't, but
Right.
before that, right, they were in some shootouts, and Carson Wentz was, he's. I don't think he's really the answer there,
Right.
but he has weapons, right, and Terry McLaurin, and they have a bunch of other wide receivers and weapons for him over there. And Carson Wentz, like I said, has been putting up points. And I think at some point, you do have to say, okay, how much can Cooper Rush do? Right?
Yeah.
At some point, it's like, the world comes back down to earth and things go back to normal. And I don't think Dak is actually going to be able to play this next game. I think he wants to. And I think in his head, that's what he's shooting for.
Right.
But I think it's hard, one, for Dak to be able to come back to play that soon. He hasn't even gotten the okay to throw the ball around yet.
Right.
On top of that, I think if you're the coaching staff and you just paid, the organization as well, you paid Dak all this money, you're winning games with Cooper Rush. What's the rush to get him back in? Yeah, he wants to play, but we're going to say, hey, Dak, hold on a little bit. We got this. Let us, give at least another week and let's see how this thing is going. We want to get you healthy so you can be our full-time quarterback.
Yeah, and just take your time.
Yeah, and then I think if Cooper Rush plays this game, he's been stepping up and he's played very well as a backup. But I think at some point that comes
that
to
catches up.
It catches up to you. We saw against the Bengals, they got up to the quick start. The Bengals started to come back, and second half of that game, that offense wasn't fully rolling against the Giants. Really, neither team looked that great, and they came out with the win. But the Giants, because it could have easily won that game, right?
Mental mistakes in that game.
We talked about divisional opponents, how these games kind of swing all over the place. So against a team in the Commanders that's hungry for a win, they've been able to put up points. Yeah, the Dallas defense has looked good, but I think there's still some points to be had here. And if you could just get some things go your way, or Cooper Rush have a little bit of an off night,
right.
I think I like the Commanders +3. And if you take them +3, if it's a close game, they could cover on the spread, even if the Cowboys find a way to win. Which, if you look at these games, right?
It's been pretty close.
They've been close, right? They won 20-17 against the Bengals. Another close game last night against the Giants. So, I do like the Commanders to cover in that one.
So another game we have actually is the Denver Broncos versus the Raiders. The Raiders are the favorite because they're at home, I'm sure. -2.5. I would take the Broncos. I'm going to take the Broncos money line. I don't believe in Derek Carr, and I think the Broncos are eventually Russ has to get it going. And I think, they were taking shots down the field. They were getting things going. And if Ryan Tannehill had some success against that defense, I think Russell Wilson is. I don't think Russell Wilson is crazy for saying that that can be an explosive offense. I think it definitely has the potential to be. It's just they have to kind of get that potential out. And again, Russell Wilson is a great quarterback. I think people forget that just because they had these defenses behind him doesn't mean that he wasn't a great quarterback. I mean, we've seen him come back against the Packers in the divisional and somehow just pull out this magic and somehow get them back into the game. And it's like, that's what quarterbacks do. That's why they get paid this money. And I think this is a game to show I'm here, and that this is a coming out party, and this is where obviously it's a great divisional game. So this is something that would have some significance. So I got the Broncos money line.
Yeah, and this is a rough game because the Raiders are desperate here, right? They're 0-3. Like we talked about, the numbers pretty much say you have a very, very slim margin to make the playoffs at this point. But yeah, it'll be a tough one. The Broncos haven't looked good, but you have to think that they're going to get it right at some point. Against the Raiders team that hasn't looked great. Like we said, the Broncos do have a great defense. I do like the Broncos to pull this one off, and that's going to be a tough one for the Raiders to go drop to 0-4, and at that point your season is really over. Done. But I do like the Broncos to find a way and find a way to improve on some things that have been happening and pull out the win here.
Right. All right. So that's all that we have for college football, for NFL. We'll be back next week to review the next games, to preview, go over some of these big games that we have coming up for college football and NFL. And thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. We want to hear some of your opinions on these games. We want to hear some of the takes that you have. Maybe some topics you can leave in the comments, and we'll get to it. So thanks for watching, and have a good one.